No one noticed Lena Ardent when she first transferred into Class 9. She sat in the back row near the window, her uniform always neat, her posture relaxed, her eyes half-focused as if school were a distant concern. Teachers marked her as average, classmates marked her as invisible, and Lena seemed perfectly content with that judgment. What no one knew was that Lena had learned long ago that attention could be dangerous. In this academy, students trained to become tactical analysts and frontline leaders for future conflicts. Talent was both currency and target. Lena answered just enough questions to pass, failed physical evaluations by the narrowest margin, and never volunteered for simulations. She listened, she observed, and she waited. At night, when the dormitory lights went out, Lena would sit on her bed and replay memories she tried to forget. The sound of alarms, the smell of smoke, and the cold glow of battlefield screens haunted her thoughts. She had survived a war before most of her classmates had learned algebra. And she intended to survive this school the same way, by staying unseen. Everything changed during the midterm strategy exam. The class was given a historical combat scenario and asked to analyze decisions made by commanders decades ago. Most students treated it like any other assignment. But when the instructor played the archived war recording, Lena's fingers froze. The voice issuing commands from the speakers was one she knew far too well. It was her own, younger, sharper, stripped of hesitation. Gasps echoed as the recording displayed a battlefield response time that shattered existing records. Students whispered as they watched the unknown commander predict enemy movements with terrifying accuracy. The instructor paused the footage and asked if anyone recognized the tactics. Lena kept her head down, but her heart pounded. Then a classmate laughed and said the commander sounded like a kid. The instructor nodded and revealed the truth. The commander had been only 12 years old, a prodigy drafted during the border wars. Lena felt the room tilt as eyes slowly turned toward her. Someone had connected the dots between archived records and enrollment data. Rumors spread faster than fire through dry grass. By the next morning, Lena's desk was no longer ignored. Some classmates stared in awe, others in suspicion, and a few in fear. The academy administration summoned her for questioning. They asked why she had hidden her abilities, why she had enrolled as a civilian-level student. Lena answered calmly, saying that war had already taken enough from her. She explained that brilliance in battle came with a cost few understood. During a live simulation later that week, the system malfunctioned, placing the class in a losing scenario. Panic set in as defenses collapsed and timers ran down. Against her better judgment, Lena stood up. Her voice cut through the chaos, precise and steady. She reorganized squads, reassigned resources, and countered the enemy in seconds. The simulation ended in a flawless reversal. Silence followed, heavy and complete. The class no longer saw a quiet girl in the back row. Recognition did not bring Lena peace. Instead, it reopened wounds she had carefully sealed. Instructors praised her, officials evaluated her, and students followed her lead without question. At night, she dreamed of those who had not survived. Friends whose names existed only in encrypted files. She confessed to her roommate that every victory replayed the losses in her mind. Strength, she said, was not something she enjoyed using. The academy offered her a fast track into elite command training. Lena hesitated, knowing what that path demanded. Another recording surfaced, this one showing her hesitating before issuing a fatal command. The class watched as even the legendary prodigy had once been afraid. For the first time, they understood that her strength was human, not mythical. On graduation day, Lena stood at the podium. She spoke not of glory or conquest, but of restraint. She told them that the greatest power was knowing when not to fight. The war recording that had revealed her past was now part of Academy history. But Lena refused to let it define her future. She declined elite command and chose to become an instructor instead, teaching students how to think before they acted, how to value lives over victory metrics. As she returned to the classroom, once again standing at the back, she smiled softly. She no longer hid her strength, but she no longer feared it either. The war had shaped her, but it did not own her. Lena believed that becoming an instructor would allow her to fade into the background again. She thought standing on the other side of the classroom would be quieter than the battlefield and gentler than command. She was wrong. From the first day she taught, students sensed there was something different about her presence. She did not raise her voice, yet silence followed her words. She did not boast of achievements, yet every instruction carried the weight of experience. Her class was called Applied Strategic Ethics, a subject many students initially dismissed as theory. Lena began not with textbooks, but with questions. She asked them what victory meant. Some answered with numbers, others with territory, a few with survival. Lena listened patiently and then played a familiar war recording. This time it was not the one that exposed her identity. It was a lesser-known clip, one where a perfect tactical strike resulted in catastrophic civilian loss. The room grew quiet as the aftermath unfolded on screen. Lena paused the recording before the casualty count appeared. She asked the class to identify the mistake. Students debated formations, intelligence gaps, delayed responses. Lena shook her head gently and said the mistake was believing war was a puzzle with clean solutions. She told them that real conflict was chaos wrapped in consequence. Week after week, her lessons challenged everything the Academy had taught for decades. She forced future commanders to simulate restraint instead of aggression, to choose withdrawal over domination, to accept imperfect outcomes in exchange for preserved lives. Some instructors criticized her methods, calling them impractical and emotional. Lena responded by inviting them to observe her class during advanced simulations. In those simulations, her students consistently achieved lower casualty rates while maintaining mission success. The data spoke louder than arguments. Outside the classroom, whispers began again, but this time they were different. Students no longer whispered about her past as a prodigy. They whispered about how her classes felt heavier, more real. One evening, Lena stayed late reviewing student evaluations. She noticed a recurring comment. They said her lessons made them afraid of making careless decisions. Lena closed the file and stared at the window. Watching the academy lights glow against the dark sky. Fear, she knew, was not the enemy. Ignorance was. Months later, the academy received news of escalating border tensions. A live response unit would be required for the first time in years. Administrators approached Lena with a request she had hoped never to hear. They asked her to advise the operation, not as a commander, but as an ethical overseer. Lena felt the familiar weight settle on her chest. The war recordings had taught her one thing above all else. That distance did not erase responsibility. She accepted the role on one condition: that her authority to abort missions would be absolute. Reluctantly, the council agreed. As the operation unfolded in real time, Lena sat behind layers of glass and screens. Her hands rested calmly on the console, though her mind raced through probabilities and memories alike. She watched young officers execute strategies she had once designed. She saw hesitation where she had taught it, and restraint where doctrine once demanded force. At a critical moment, intelligence suggested a decisive strike. The room leaned forward, waiting for Lena's assessment. She studied the data, the terrain, the human patterns hidden beneath numbers. Then she shook her head. She recommended delay, evacuation corridors, and negotiation channels. The decision was controversial, but it was followed. Hours later, the conflict de-escalated without a single recorded casualty. The room remained silent, stunned not by victory, but by its quietness. That night, Lena returned to her quarters exhausted, yet lighter than she had felt in years. She realized that her strength had never truly been about tactics or command speed. It had been about seeing consequences before they happened. In the weeks that followed, the Academy revised its core curriculum. Applied strategic ethics became mandatory. War recordings were no longer shown as trophies of brilliance, but as lessons carved from loss. Lena continued to teach from the back of the room, never seeking the spotlight. Students still recognized her power, but they also understood its cost. For the first time, Lena felt that the past had finally transformed into something useful. Not a shadow that followed her, but a warning she could pass on. She no longer hid her strength, not because it had been revealed, but because it had finally found a purpose beyond war. Lena believed that purpose would finally quiet the past. For a while, it did. The Academy settled into a new rhythm shaped by restraint, ethics, and accountability. Students graduated with fewer illusions and more questions, and Lena considered that a success. Then one morning, an unmarked data package arrived in her secure inbox. There was no sender identification, no Academy seal, only an encryption code she had not seen in years. Her breath slowed as she unlocked it. The interface was old, stripped down, designed for battlefield efficiency rather than elegance. A ghost system. The message contained a single line before the attachment. Active unit requesting confirmation of Commander Ardent. Lena closed her eyes. That title no longer belonged to her. She had buried it beneath years of silence and deliberate obscurity. But the past, she had learned, never truly waited for permission. The attachment opened into a live war recording, not an archive. This was happening now. The feed showed a fractured urban zone, civilians moving through rubble, autonomous units holding shaky perimeters. And at the center of the chaos was a tactical pattern so familiar it made her chest ache. It was her work. Not copied, not adapted, but executed with the same logic she had once carved into survival doctrine. Someone out there had learned from her too well. The message updated. Chain of command compromised. Advisory override requested. Lena stood slowly from her desk. Outside, the Academy moved on unaware, students debating theory while reality knocked on the door. She walked to the council chamber without waiting to be summoned. The administrators saw her expression and did not ask questions. They activated the secure channel. The battlefield expanded across the wall screens. Casualty projections climbed with every passing second. The young officers on site were skilled, disciplined, and terrified. Lena recognized that fear. It was the moment before instinct surrendered to training. She requested a private channel to the field unit. Authorization hesitated for less than a second before granting. When her voice reached the command room on the other side of the world, it went silent. She did not introduce herself. She simply said she was there. Relief cracked through the channel like static. The unit commander asked for orders. Lena paused. This was the moment she had once embraced without question. But she was not the same person anymore. She asked them to describe what they could not see on the screens. The smells, the sounds, the civilians who did not appear in projections. Confusion followed, then understanding. As reports came in, the data changed shape. Patterns shifted, assumptions broke. Lena guided them not with commands, but with questions. What happens if you wait? Who benefits if you advance? What cannot be undone once you act? Minutes stretched, then hours. Enemy movement slowed, negotiations opened, evacuations succeeded. The crisis deflated instead of detonating. When the feed finally ended, the casualty count was lower than any projection had predicted. The council exhaled collectively, but Lena felt no triumph. She felt recognition. Someone had built a doctrine from her past self and applied it without her restraint. That truth unsettled her more than the battle itself. In the days that followed, Lena investigated quietly. She traced the patterns, the training markers, the decision trees. They led her to a classified program dissolved years ago. A program that had used her recordings as primary instruction material. Her brilliance had been replicated without her humanity. Anger surfaced, slow and cold. Not at the students who learned from it, but at the system that had extracted results and discarded the cost. Lena addressed the academy publicly for the first time since graduation. She did not accuse. She explained. She showed them side-by-side recordings. Her early commands beside the same logic stripped of ethical breaks. She let the silence do the work. Then she said something that reshaped the room. Skill without conscience is just faster destruction. The academy halted all external doctrine sharing that day. Curriculum audits followed, and Lena was asked, formally this time, to lead a new division. Not command, not instruction, but oversight of legacy knowledge. She accepted, because someone had to guard what brilliance could become when separated from responsibility. Months later, Lena archived her own recordings again. This time with annotations, doubts, and moments of fear left intact. She did not erase the prodigy. She contextualized her, so no one would mistake speed for wisdom again. On quiet evenings, Lena still sat by the window at the back of the room, watching students argue, question, and hesitate. She realized then that hiding her strength had never been the real lesson. The lesson was knowing when to reveal it, and how to ensure it never stood alone. The war recordings would always exist, but now so would the warning woven into them. And Lena Ardent finally believed that was enough.